So the first thing to know with types of data is that there's a type of hierarchy in terms of the amount of information you're given and the type of statistical things you can do with it. So the lowest level is nominal data. And these would be just categories, hair color, ethnicity, color of your car, the mood that you're in today. The next level up would be ordinal data. And these would be things like rankings, where you can tell that one thing is higher than the other, but you can't tell how much it's higher. So a race for second and third, the distance between first and second may be very different than the distance between second and third place in a race. So that gives us ordinal. And with either of these two are collectively called qualitative data. You can't do too much at least we won't do too much mathematically here. You can't take an average of the data. You can't do a lot of the statistical tests that we'll do. So those are qualitative data. What we'll predominantly work with in the class are called quantitative data. And there's a couple ways to break the quantitative data down. One is into discrete and continuous. Discrete means there's a certain amount of possible outcomes, and the ones in between those outcomes aren't always allowed. So, for example, here they say the number of home runs in a baseball game. You could have 3 home runs, or you could have 2 home runs, but you couldn't have 2.3 home runs in a baseball game. That would be an invalid number because it's discrete. There's only a certain amount of numbers that are allowed, and the numbers in between those aren't always allowed. Whereas continuous, the height of children, I mean, you could be 5'6". I guess children, you could be 3'6" or 3'7", but really you could even be in between there too. You could be 3'6.5" or 3'6 3/4. As you grow, you're going to hit all of those heights in between. So even at like a long decimal height could be possible. So that's what a continuous data point is. Now, quantitative data are also split into interval and ratio data. That's a different type of split here. You could have a continuous interval, or you could have continuous ratio. It's a different type of split. Interval is going back to that hierarchy, interval is the lower level, less information, and ratio is the higher level. And both of these, by the way, in SPSS, both of these are called scale. So they collectively call the quantitative data scale data. So the difference between interval and ratio is that interval does not have a meaningful 0. And a way to think of that is think of what a 2 and what a 4 would represent on whatever scale you're looking at. If a 4 would be twice as much as whatever a 2 is, then you can know that you have something that's in ratio form. It's not always crystal clear how to do that, but let's say how you're feeling today on a scale of 1 to 5, and 5 is really happy. We might agree that a 4 is not twice as happy as a 2, so that would not be a ratio scale. It would even be these Likert scales. This is how much are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. Really, technically, they're more ordinal data because the distance between 2 and 3 might not be the same as the distance between 3 and 4. But if you were going to consider it quantitative data, it would definitely be interval and not ratio data. So we'll go through just some quick example types of cars, because that's not a meaningful number. It's these categories that are distinct. This would be a type of qualitative data, and specifically this would be nominal data. So inside qualitative we have the nominal and the ordinal. This would be nominal data, which is part of qualitative. Heights of sunflowers, on the other hand, are meaningful numbers, and the distance between 1 and 2 inches is the same as the distance between 2 and 3. So we do have quantitative data, and in fact these would be ratio data, not just interval. Both of those are the two types of quantitative, but because a meaningful 0 is there. A sunflower that's 4 inches tall is twice as high as one that's 2 inches tall. That would even be ratio. And again, they're not asking us to go into that detail here, but there are other questions that do ask you to go into that. So we just want the general category that they're quantitative here. Temperatures in Kelvin. So this is 0 does have a meaningful 0, and temperatures, even 3.22226 is a valid temperature. So because of that, we can go at basically any number in between there, not just 2 degrees Kelvin or 3 degrees Kelvin. So that would be continuous. Hair color. So it's qualitative data, and we typically think of discrete and continuous, for the most part, refer to quantitative data. So hair color really isn't even represented by a number, so that would be neither. Okay, so here we have to do a couple different ones. Total weight of sugar imported. So that is a number, a meaningful number we could take an average of, so it's quantitative. Total weight. Weight could be 2 pounds, 3 pounds, but it really could even be in between, 2.3 pounds, 2.5 pounds. So that would be continuous. And the highest level, so 4 pounds of sugar is twice as much as 2 pounds of sugar. So we're looking at ratio, not just interval. Both of these are quantitative, but since there is a meaningful 0 here, we would get. Okay, now we're looking at rankings of 3 books. Rankings are going to be ordinal, which is a type of qualitative, so you can get those two right away. And typically qualitative are going to be neither, not discrete or continuous. They're just going to be neither. We'll submit that answer. Number of questions answered correctly on a 10-question quiz. So you couldn't get 3.2 right. Well, I mean, I guess you could get partial credit, but when they say number of questions, they're really looking for either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not the numbers in between there. Kind of pizza that we're ordering. These are categories. If you even use a number, it's arbitrary. The number is totally meaningless. So we'd have qualitative, would not be discrete or continuous. And this is just categorical or nominal data here. Lengths of time it takes for new light bulbs to burn out are example of which type of data. Well, time, I mean, it could be 3 seconds, 4 seconds, but it really could be 3.35 seconds. It could be something in between there. So because of that, that would be continuous. So that gives you an example of some of the different ways that we would rank these. These do turn out to be important because they dictate which type of tests we can run as we get later on into the statistical course. So it is worth spending some time getting familiar with data types. You should, I do want to mention though, if you go on the internet to search, different textbook authors, different researchers sometimes have slightly different names for those data types. That hierarchy is always present, but sometimes you'll see it called categorical, sometimes nominal, sometimes they even have a different name for that specific type of variable. So do be aware as you're looking online that you might see some different names out there for data types.